taken our followers' feedback on board in regards to our betting promotions we've done a couple of weeks now, and we will no longer be posting any betting promotions. Thanks to everyone who made their feelings felt.
The feedback has been overwhelmingly negative, and we've taken that into account. As a shitposting page and as a AFL fan page, like we've got to, keep our followers happy. So
yeah, we do need to make a little bit of money to cover expenses that we do have. We do all this voluntarily, but we will look to other ways and means to do that in the future.
Welcome to the Unnecessary Statness podcast, brought to you by the team from Useless AFL Stats Facebook page, bringing you the AFL's weird, bizarre, and totally irrelevant stats you never asked for and never knew you needed, with Liam Crowy Crowhurst, Bill the Bulldog Skelton, and Aaron Delaporte.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of Unnecessary Statness. I'm Della, and I'm joined with Bill and Liam. G'day, guys.
Hey, mate. How you doing?
How you going, Aaron?
Good. Another busy and interesting round of AFL, round 20. We had the unusual 5 Sunday games, Super Sunday, some people were calling it, where the 3 games that were scheduled for Queensland all got moved at the last minute onto Sunday, the first time ever 5 games on a Sunday, and they all overlapped, so it was impossible to watch them all. I actually caught them on replay. And I was off at Optus Stadium, so I missed a fair bit of those games. I've still got some catching up to do during the week. But I heard the Sydney Essendon one was a good game, so I'm keen to see that. And we had a few people tell us that 3 times this year Essendon have scored over 100, and their opponents beaten them all 3 times, with Sydney being the last one, which is quite interesting.
That was you had to ask me what caught my eye, because I was about to say something about the game that caught my eye.
Yes.
That Sydney allowed Essendon to score 102 points, which was the biggest score against for Sydney this year. Yet they won. So that was quite interesting. It has happened earlier in this year as well. The Western Bulldogs in round 2 let a team score biggest score against them this year, and the Western Bulldogs also won. Pretty uncommon. The largest scoring such game was in 1989, Geelong versus Hawthorn. So Hawthorn allowed Geelong to score 163 points, I think it was, their biggest allowed score for the year. But because they scored 171, they got to win. So yeah, it was a pretty interesting little quirk that, in some ways, that's the worst Sydney's played this year, judged by score against, but they still won.
So it's their worst defensive effort, but they just did enough offensively to get there.
Yeah, I think that's what the AFL wants to see, is teams forget about defending and just score.
Oh, I can tell you, I was at the Freo Richmond game, and I was sick of seeing points get scored. Apparently, it was windy, but where I was, I couldn't feel anything. So, I know we had a question about, was that the most inaccurate half of football? It was 210. I'm just getting it up now. It was 210 to 1-8. It was actually a game between Adelaide and North Melbourne, where the score at halftime was 0-10 to 1-8. So there was the same amount of points and 2 less goals in that one. I haven't checked the weather for that one, but that must have been a real shocker. And that score also finished with a worse score than the Freo Richmond game. They managed to scramble to 7 and 6 goals in the Freo game. I think they both finished on, I think it was like 5-19 to 5-13, that North Melbourne Adelaide one. So there has been worse, surprisingly. What caught your eye, Liam?
So big news today, just earlier as we came out, is that Chris Mayne has announced his retirement. He's been around for quite a while. Chris Mayne, obviously playing for the Fremantle Dockers and now playing for Collingwood. So we're going to miss him. And it recently came in through the messages from the Facebook page that he's having a pretty good final season. So we went through and had a look to see who had the best final season before their retirement. So we have a metric for this. So we're going to use like Supercoach points and fantasy points to determine how good a player is in their final season. So currently Chris Mayne is averaging 97 Supercoach points with 3 games remaining. But on top, in the number 1 position, is Leon Davis for Collingwood played 21 games and averaging 101 Supercoach points. Now, interestingly, he got an All-Australian that year. He was going to play next year for Collingwood, but decided to turn down the Collingwood's offer because he was going to take a 30% pay cut. So Collingwood, even back in 2011, are pretty stingy with paying their superstars. And I guess Leon Davis had enough and went, I'm going to play in the waffle. So he goes back to WA with his family in Perth and decides to play in the WAFL.
It's funny you should say that because I heard Chris Mayne on the radio. So I was coming home from work, and that's the exact same reason why he's not going to try and continue with Collingwood, because him and his partner's family are all in Perth.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently a couple of times in the last 12 months, the grandparents have tried to come over. He's got a couple of young kids and they haven't been able to. So that's his reasons for going back. He did say he was still open to potentially playing. So if there's a chance he could go back to Freo, or maybe the Eagles could pick him up. So
could pick him up, mature age rookie. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd sort of be surprised, but we've seen worse things happen, that's for sure.
Yeah, we've seen worse. So Leon Davis averaging 101 Supercoach points, and Lenny Hayes in 2014 played his final season, 20 matches, for 101 Supercoach points. That's kind of the benchmark. They're the only two players above 100 in their final season. So it'd be interesting to see if Chris Mayne can get up there as well. I believe he needs to average 373. Sorry, he needs a total of 373 Supercoach points over the next 3 games to break Leon Davis's record. So all the best for him. So Collingwood realistically only have 3 more games.
We're going to have to yell out to him because he could get above the average with some sort of 140-point game this week.
Mm-hmm.
And then we need to tell him he has to pull out.
Exactly. Yes. He could be well above average.
He could also go back and chair some more players off in milestone games.
Exactly. Can he chair himself off in the final as like his final game?
Yeah, that'd be good if he could. I don't know if there's many players coming up. I think if he went to the Eagles, he could potentially chair off Gaff or Darling in their 250th, and maybe Michael Walters in his 200th at Freo.
They bring him on, let's say they put him on as a medical sub and they don't use him for the game, but they specifically use him as a chair offerer, almost like a designated chair offer. That would be the way to go. And also, as just kind of a technicality, Paul Johnson and Tim Schmidt played in their final season. They only played 1 game in their final season, but they averaged 110 and 105 Supercoach points respectively. Paul Johnson played for West Coast and Melbourne and then got traded to Hawthorn, where he played 1 game in 2011 and scored 110 Supercoach points and was never seen again. Truly remarkable. And Tim Schmidt is the other one. So he played 17 games for Sydney, and his final game was in 2008, where he averaged 105 Supercoach points.
Something else caught our eye, Della. Actually brought the page potentially into disrepute.
Yes.
Cam and Zach Guthrie had blinders, and the game ends, and
especially
Zach.
Zach, yes. I think he's done that once before. He's had a blinder out of nowhere. But...
Yeah, he's struggled to find a consistent role, but he seems to have a lot of nous and sort of ability without. Yeah, that's not the point though. The point is that we get messages at the end of the games, and someone goes, Cam and Zach Guthrie, 28 touches each. Is this the most ever by brothers? And I had the app open, and so I'm a Geelong fan, so I was sort of quickly double checked that the message was correct, and it was.
You're
28,
invested.
28. So I pull out the old useless AFL stats supercomputer, plug in, and I start to look for brothers with identical disposals and to see where it ranks. It doesn't rank first. It ranks 6 all times between the Crouch brothers at Adelaide.
The Corns.
Yeah, the Corns are in there, the Crackers, but they slot into the top 10. So we do a post, and then it comes to our attention, after the fact that Cam Guthrie has had his statistics updated to 29. Yeah, so I was sort of unaware that. I mean, you've got a bit of maybe thoughts as to how or why this happens, so Della.
Yeah, so it happens occasionally. I know this because of fantasy football. Occasionally you see your points change. I'm a regular fantasy football player, and sometimes it's resulted in wins instead of losses, or the reverse is really hard to take when you think you've won a game and you end up losing because they've taken a tackle away. As the games progress, champion data are feeding in the stats. Someone's calling it and someone's recording it using a typing technique where they quickly enter it into the computer. And often in really frenetic pieces of play, they may flag that, 30 seconds or a minute to be reviewed, and then they'll quickly review it after the quarter. So that's when there could potentially be either a tackle taken away or something added on. In this case, it probably was a lot of handballs get missed, especially if they're in tight. So I'd say that was probably what's happened there, and unfortunately stuffed up our stat.
Yes, it serves me right, getting the laptop out minutes after the game, and should have waited. We were too quick on that one as a page.
Oh, I still liked it. At least we had the other ones there. It does give the Guthrie something to chase in future.
I think we need to do maybe a disclaimer for the page. All stats are correct at the time of publishing, because technically that stat was correct at that point in time. And just because after the fact there's been a bit of revisionist history has come in and changed the narrative. So I reckon we can confidently say that we've got that stat correct at the time of publishing.
You reckon Zach walked up to Cam and said, hey, I finally caught up, and then Cam called up champion data and went, look,
he's like, find me something.
The third quarter, I really reckon I might have got 2 handballs in that little passage. Got to stay ahead of the little brother.
Exactly. I can't be shown up.
Yeah. I've heard of local footballers knowing their exact stats, but they're probably not getting 20 plus disposals. Yeah.
I can guarantee that I always knew mine. Counting to 1, 2 on a good day is pretty easy. Not that we're a cricket page, but I've always felt that cricketers that claim they don't know what they're on when they're batting are lying about that.
Yeah, I'd be surprised on that one.
You've got to know.
You've got to know. I always knew. And people that say they don't know, I mean, come on, you're on 3, you hit a single, now you're on 4. Not that hard to keep track.
Well, something else I'd be interested to know was, and this one got brought to our attention, was the triple Bailey possession chain, where we had Bailey Williams passing to Bailey Dale, and I'm wondering whether Bailey Dale knew that and he looked for Bailey Smith to get the triple Bailey stat going. That would be interesting to know. But he was literally 15 metres in front of him in the clear, so possibly not. I really like that one. Another thing that caught my eye was the Freo and West Coast, the 2 WA teams' current percentage in the 8 at a very late stage of the season. Fremantle being on only 90.9%, which is the lowest ever after round 20, which is quite amazing. So basically they're doing as little as possible to be in finals contention. 9 wins, 10 losses. And that is, as we posted on Facebook, the lowest percentage ever after round 20. Good effort by them. And West Coast not too far in front of them with 95.9.
Something that caught my eye coming in, we had a message coming from Jack Kelly who said, since the beginning of the AFL era, Richmond have never made the finals in a year that has had the Summer Olympics. And he's very kindly put it all out for us. So in 1992, all the way through to 2016, in instances of 4 years, Richmond have finished outside the 8, essentially. And you can even go back further than that. 88, they finished 10th. 84, they finished 8th, but there were only 6 finalists. And that's kind of where it stops. So it's interesting. Currently, the Tokyo 2020 Olympics is on. So technically it's 2020. And in 2020, Richmond finished 3rd, I believe. Yes? Yeah, they finished 3rd.
Yes, it's COVID.
The Olympics are in 2021 and they're set to finish outside the 8. I mean, touch wood, Richmond finished outside the 8. That would be amazing for everyone involved.
Well, they'll need a bit of luck to get inside the 8. They can.
They will. They've really got to.
They can technically do it.
They can. But it's interesting to see that whenever the Olympics are on in that particular year, Richmond just can't seem to find it. Maybe they're too invested in the Olympics, or maybe some of their players or staff are really invested.
Or maybe they're just really bad every 4 years.
Yeah, like clockwork almost. But it is a bit of a stretch, but here at UAS, we don't mind it.
Who scored votes this week in the Brownlow Medal?
3 games to go for the Mo votes. And I noticed on the weekend Patrick Dangerfield rocked the retro moustache, potentially to try and grab some votes, but he didn't quite do enough. I've actually did a little search for Dangerfield, and I noticed that he's actually grown the mustache a few times in retro round. So he's trying to lead the charge for that. We did post that all players should be forced to wear long sleeve and grow a mustache for retro round. I think it needs to come into their contracts, be written in to do that. Be good for the game. It's what the fans want. But anyway, on to the votes. And we gave 5 to Bailey Dale, possibly the best of the triple Baileys now. He had a stellar game off halfback with 31 disposals at 83% efficiency and 682 metres gained, 9 intercepts and another nice goal. Interestingly, Bailey Dale has kicked 9 goals, 0 behinds this year, making him the most accurate player in the league. I think the next highest goals without a behind is only 4. He's not making our inaccurate team of the round at any stage this year at all. So good game by him. It actually puts him in contention. I'll update the the leaderboard a bit later. 4 votes. Luke Jackson, 23 disposals at 88%. His mustache inspection for this round just barely passed. It's getting a bit thin, and it possibly is turning into a goatee. So I have to keep an eye on that. But we liked his 4 first half goals. He sort of tore the heart out of Gold Coast in that one, and did they capitulate? 3 votes to our leader, Tom Stewart. I think he's really making this award his own now. He had 24 disposals at 91% efficiency, 8 intercepts for the Cats. So they ground out a good win against the improving North Melbourne. I'm sure you'll be happy with that, Bill, that Tommy Stewart's looking good. Good for this
Been
one.
campaigning for him.
Yep. His main rival, Jake Lever, and Tom Liberatore did get the 2 and the 1. So it was a good defensive game by Lever. He only had 14 disposals, but he went at 100% efficiency, had 8 intercepts and 8 marks. His stats probably would have been higher, except Gold Coast barely got the ball into his area after quarter time. So we allowed for that, giving him the 2. And then the 1, of course, to Liberatore, 25 disposals with 8 tackles and a very classy goal. It was just standard Libba stuff for him, and we've given him the 1. Honourable mentions to Jeff Bruce. I liked his goal square mark. It was an absolute cracker. Bailey Smith, Sam Draper, Zach Tui, and Jake Lloyd. Jake Lloyd seems to be always an honourable mention. So our leaderboard is Tom Stewart, nearly got one hand on the medal with 34, Tom Liberatore 29, Bailey Dale into 3rd on 26, just ahead of Lever on 25, and Taylor Walker's sort of stagnated like the Adelaide Crows have with 23. So there you go. All right, it's now time for Bill's deep dive. Over to you, Bill.
Thanks, Della. Came together pretty late this week. You had an interesting idea, I thought, of looking at players' names through the lens of a deck of cards and then sort of translating that into poker hands. So I suppose, just to give a quick example, someone like Kent Kingsley has the word king in his name. And so every time Richmond or Geelong played Kent Kingsley, they would have a king in their team. And there are obviously many players with some unique names. For example, there is a player called Don Balfour, who played for Collingwood in the late 30s and 40s, who has F-O-U-R in his name. So he's a 4 for Collingwood. And there's all sorts of players like that. And just sort of had a look at some of the poker hands that can be composed of these players.
Well, just to give people some idea, I did a little scan of the 12,000 plus players' names to have played. It's actually 24 aces, 61 kings, only 3 queens, all McQueen, 555 jacks, and 41 tens, including some legends like Ted Witt 10, John Platten, and of course Brett Ratton, those sort of guys.
Yes, and unfortunately there are no 9s and there are no 7s. It became very difficult to compose a straight, which is in poker 5 cards in sequential order. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because there were no 3s and there were no 5s. There were also no 9s. So the only option we had for a straight is a 10, Jack, Queen, King, Ace. But unfortunately, the Queens, as you mentioned, there was 3 of them, never played in a team that also included a 10, Jack, King, or Ace. So unfortunately, no straight has ever been made. So what we're left with is basically 3 of a kinds, 4 of a kinds, full houses, which is 3 of one number and 2 of another, dominated by jacks.
We need someone to recruit a queen. I don't know if that's a possibility for next year's draft, but
We'll have to have a look at the draft. But yeah, that's really we need some more McQueens, really. That's letting us down. It's just, yeah, it's by far the most unusual. I mean, if you look at the cards either side of it, yeah, 500 jacks, only 3 queens. So we've ever played. So it does make it tough. 2 teams have ever had 2 aces. So from a Texas Hold'em perspective, where you start with 2 cards, the best hand is to get what's called pocket aces. So 120 years ago, Fitzroy had a player called Jim Grace and Mick Grace. So both of their names end in ace. So they had pocket aces.
first club for pocket aces.
Yep. They won a couple of grand finals with them as well. So
Oh, wow.
how good. And then in 1981, Terry Wallace and Robert Mace combined for Hawthorn. So both of those names end in ACE. So that's pocket aces.
They didn't win a grand final too, did they?
In 81, these 2 players did not play in the grand final. I don't think they did. I think they won it in 1980. Not sure about 81. We could have stumbled on something brilliant here. No, it was between Carlton and Collingwood, and Carlton won. I'm pretty sure Richmond won in 1980.
Yes, they did. Hawthorn were up there in the 80s,
Yeah.
early 80s, but yeah, they never got to the big dance.
And yeah, so a team has had pocket kings before, and it's only ever been done by one team. I don't think you can make a guess. I'd be very impressed if you could guess it.
Richmond.
They've had Jake King. North
Yeah,
Melbourne
I'm just going off that. Yeah.
David King.
Yep. And
I reckon it might be
and Ken Kings. Oh, sorry, I already mentioned him. It was Ken Kingsley.
Yeah, they had Hocking, Kingsley.
Yeah, so that one's been done. The Queens have never been done. So there were not. Unfortunately, this deep dive ends with me saying there's not many great hands. There's obviously a lot of 4 of a kind jacks.
Oh yeah.
There's any 5 of a kind jacks where there's something wrong with the deck.
Overflowing jacks.
Yeah, there's actually the record is 7. So a
team, that's a broken deck. Yeah.
Yeah, if someone pulls out seven jacks on you,
it's a double deck.
Yeah, maybe ask for your money back. It was sort of led by Captain Blood, and Richmond had 7 jacks back in the day. Jack's still obviously a very common name now.
Yeah, we got the St Kilda Jacks and the West Coast Jacks.
Yep. But some players actually have 2 cards in their name. So some players have, they sort of get to count for 2. And so I had a look at some of these names. Now, there's actually been multiple players called Jack King, which I thought was great because 100% of their names, there's no, if you take half of their last name in the middle of their first name, these guys are just basically
it's all card.
A poker hand, yeah.
All card.
Wonder what their middle names were.
Yeah, Queen. And so I then sort of ranked them. The Jack King is an okay poker hand. Almost every one of these players with 2 in their names, one of them is Jack. So Jack Jones is a Jack and a 1.
A 1?
Yeah.
A 1? An ace?
You're playing Uno now.
Oh, sorry.
I don't think you can have a 1.
No, I was wondering why I had too many cards. I worked at a casino for 5 years too. So we'll get rid of the 1s. So Jack Jones, forget him. So actually the only player left who has 2 cards in his name that isn't called Jack is Kane 10 Ace. Or Kane 10 Ace.
That's a good one.
Yes, Blackjack 10 Ace.
Yeah, it's Blackjack. And look, it's probably marginal if you're playing poker. Do you want a 10 and an ace or a Jack and a King?
Maybe if they're suited.
Yeah, it would come down to the suits. So that's probably one for context and situation and position and chip stack sizes and all that sort of stuff. It's not an obvious call, but if you're on a blackjack table, then the 10 and ace is certainly the better hand. So I'm not sure Ainton Ace leads the league or has ever led a game in any statistic.
Here's now.
He's pretty quick, if I remember. But yeah, I'll say that he's probably got the best name in terms of cards probably the league's ever seen. Or Jack King. Yeah, Jack King is quite good.
Very good. So what?
There's a couple of eights. There's a couple of eights in there. I think you may have mentioned. So
Yeah,
Cody Waitman.
Cody Waitman is
Yeah. Jared Waite. Ooh, Jared Waite? Do we include him? He's got the pronunciation.
There's also Lee Tudor. So his first name ends in EIGH and his last name starts with T.
Wow.
So I wasn't sure whether or not to include Lee Tudor as an 8. I ultimately did because I was trying to find good hands. There's a couple of players like that I'm not sure technically count, but I like to count players like that.
Yeah, well, Kane, just back on Kane 10 ace, he wore number 10, which I really like. And Zach Tui, it's not technically a 2, but because it's the U instead of W, he also wears 2. So I like those 2 Geelong players for that.
There's a couple of, there's I think 9 players who have, let's call them legitimate 2s. And I'm probably going to mispronounce it, but it's, I think, Twomey.
Yes, there's an AFL journalist, Cal Toomey.
Yep.
And then there's also Walt Wallerman, who, again, is a bit of a technicality because it's his first name starts with T, his last name W-O, and Bert Warner as well are maybe, fringe 2s or fake 2s. So there's outside that family, there's a couple of more make-believe 2s.
Nice. So if we're playing a 5-handed poker, what's the best that we can do?
4 jacks with an ace.
Oh wow.
Any full house?
Yeah, there's a lot of full houses. Like, I mean, many teams have fielded 3 jacks, and then they've had a couple of kings or a couple of whatever. So there's a lot of full houses for sure. But no straights. It's hard to make flushes when there's no suits.
No, there's literally no suits. There's never been a diamond, never been a spade. Even though those are legitimate last names.
No hearts.
There's heart. I think there might have been. There's been heart misspelt hearts.
H-A-R-T.
Yeah, I don't think there's been. Stand corrected. I don't know if there's been any legitimate hearts. I'm just gonna.
No, it doesn't seem like there's any legitimate hearts. Yeah. H-E-A-R-T.
There's definitely no clubs, unless we do a cross. I didn't do the cross naming, like someone's name ending with a C and then starting with L-U-B.
No, I just checked all of those.
Wow.
Yeah, no good.
So disappointing. So the first player that comes along to do that, we'll have to give them a shout out. I knew a guy named Fred Diamond, but he wasn't much of a footballer. He was more a drinker and a smoker.
Neil Diamond.
Yeah, of course, Neil Diamond and David Spade. But he probably wouldn't have been very good at football unless he was one of those small forwards that were got in your face. But, very good, good with the deep dive. So 4 Jackson and ace.
4 Jackson and ace
is technically the best hand, and seemingly St Kilda would be rocking that nearly every game this year.
I'll let you know the last time it's happened, and I'll look that up for you.
It's got to be last week, I'd say.
I can't think of an ace that they have, but
sorry, I'm thinking of a king. Yes, they're rocking 4 jacks and a king every week. It's not helping them because they're out of contention. Yeah, they had. They didn't have a lot of jacks last week. Jack Billings, Jack Higgins, and Jack Steele. No, they were one jack short. That is Zach, but not Jack.
Yeah, and looking at more poker terminology, you have the flop and the turn and then the river. There's never been a flop in the AFL, FLOP. That hasn't happened, but there's been a couple of turns.
There's been Jack Watts.
Oh, yeah.
A bit of a flop.
Alex Rance, we could put him down as a flop maybe.
Joe Danaher.
Danaher had one recently, so we got Danaher down as our flop.
We've got a bets.
Bets, yep. No blinds, unfortunately. A couple of Rivers or Driver with the name River.
I think we've had some folds, and and what's the other?
Yes, John Worsfold.
John Westfold. What is it when you pass? I can't remember what it's called.
Check.
A check. We had any checks? I'm sure we've had.
Who's that goalkeeper? Peter Cech. CZEH. See? I think that counts.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Eric Scheck. Here's his last name. ZSCHECH.
Oh, wow.
Eric Scheck. So if we really want to go for it, then we also have a check in there.
What about stay? Is that a betting term? Because we got
Stay.
damning
Yeah,
stay.
you can play on a blackjack table.
Yeah.
Blackjack maybe. Eric Scheck played in the VFL born in 1909. Played for Richmond, 101 games.
So St Kilda had the 4 jacks and an ace 14 times this season. Most recently around 18. So they haven't had it for a couple of weeks, but they've certainly done it plenty. Collingwood side did it plenty of times, like over 100 times in the 40s and 50s. So yeah, certainly been done a bit.
And I don't know if we've ever had a raise. We've had Ray, but not. We've got Razor Ray.
My uncle Stephen Ray played in a premiership for Richmond.
Yes, excellent.
All in. Do we have any all ins?
I'm checking.
I think we're starting to push it a bit more. We're scraping the bottom of the barrel here.
Yeah, I think we're done. I think it's time to move on to.
I think Jack Alister is the closest. ALLI, but not quite the N.
A very drunk person at the table pushing all their chips in. I'm all soon.
Yeah,
maybe
I get it.
Brett Allison, he's very close to all in. If he didn't have the IS in there, he's all on instead of all in. And the Wallaces that have played, there's a few of those, but no, unfortunately not. All right. Oh, Call's another one. We had Ian Callanan who played for Adelaide. I remember actually doing a useless stat about bets, call, and fold, and I think it was definitely better to be bets than to be calling or folding. There you go.
Yeah, that's one from the archives. I do remember that one. Maybe that was about a year or two ago. Now we would have posted that. Yeah,
I'll have to dig that one up.
Now it's time for Liam's mailbag.
Suggestions come in, and this first one comes from a Bailey Bolstrasis. Hey, wondering if there's a thing for a team losing to the 2 Perth teams by the same amount in the same season. So Richmond this year have lost to Fremantle and West Coast by 4 points within the same season.
Yes.
And we can see that they are the 9th team to have lost to the Western teams, I guess you could say. Most recent before that being the Western Bulldogs, who in 2018 lost twice by 54 points to Fremantle in round 5 and West Coast in round 18.
Jeez, that's a bad
and the
effort.
time before that, 2015, Melbourne also lost by 54 points to West Coast in round 14 and Fremantle round 22.
Wow,
Wasn't a good time to be a Melbourne fan that era.
No. And interestingly, you can also go back to 2013. West Coast also lost to a WA-based team twice. They lost to Fremantle in round 1 and round 16.
By the same margin?
Yeah, same margin, negative by 28 points.
They were the times.
And that kind of got me thinking, well, are there any other occurrences? So we can also have a look at the Brisbane-based, Queensland-based teams. And it's only happened once where there have been consecutive losses, and one there's been win for win. So St Kilda beat Brisbane and Gold Coast by 31 points in 2017.
Nice.
And in 2020, Sydney lost by 32 points to Gold Coast and Brisbane, round 7 and round 17, respectively. Interesting duopoly there, Brisbane and Gold Coast. Fairly recent, so there's not really too much history there. But we can have a look also the next one, Port Adelaide and Adelaide.
Yep.
The biggest loss was North Melbourne in 2003. They lost to Adelaide by 54 points, and then Port Adelaide also by 54
Very
points.
good. Before you dig the next one up, I just wanted to mention Nick John Wicksberg. What a great name. Sent us in one. We didn't convert it into a stat because it was to do with a tribunal or a match review fine. Xavier O'Halloran has been charged with rough conduct, dangerous tackle against Xavier Dersma. We can't prove this, but this may be the first time a player with an X in their first name has been suspended for conduct against another player with X. There are two Xaviers involved in that fine of $2,000 he got for that. So yeah, very interesting. I think Xavier O'Halloran or either Xavier O'Neill were the first XOs ever to play AFL as well.
Yeah, XO, Gossip Girl. We just needed like Tristan Zeri also to somehow get involved, and we could have a triple X dust up. Is that able to happen? Do we think 3 X's in the same melee?
We need to have state of origin instead of state of origin. We can have alphabet of origin or something. Have all the X's and J's and Q's and W's and Y's and Z's all playing together. Be an interesting team, I think.
Definitely. And just back on the previous stats, so we're talking about. So we can also have a look at the Sydney-based teams. So we have Great and Western Sydney and Sydney. Just to kind of round it out, North Melbourne lost to both of them in 2017 by 42 points. So they lost to Great and Western Sydney in round 3 and Sydney in round 8, both of them by 42 points.
Another one we can't prove but got asked. These are really useless stats because we've got no way of proving them or not. Adam Johnson asked, was Ryan Mansell the longest first goal ever by a player? I don't know if you saw this one, but a Freo player he kicked it out on the full and Mansell took the kick in. It was about 70 metres out, and there was a howling gale at Optus, and he tried to just kick it into the forward line and it bounced over some players' heads. It was about 70 metres. I can't remember a longer first goal, but potentially there may have been one. Unfortunately, another one we can't prove or disprove, but a good pick up on that, Adam.
Nonetheless, yeah. This next mailbag comes in from Cameron Jones. Just wondering if you have a stat for the most a team has made up in the final quarter and still lose. So what we're talking about here is if a team is trailing by quite a lot at Q3.
The biggest failed comeback.
The biggest failed comeback, I guess, is a really good shorthand. So they've started from 10 goals down and they've got really close. So having a look, now we have quarter time stats all the way back to the beginning of time.
Yep.
quite amazing. And we have to go all the way back to 1940, round 10, Carlton versus Hawthorn. Carlton, 3/4 time, they were down by 57 points. They came back and only lost by 7.
Wow.
So they made up 50 points to still lose it in the last quarter.
Good effort.
A really good effort. So 50 is the outright leader. And in for equal second, we have 47 is the biggest comeback. 1980 Fitzroy, when they played Carlton, they were down by 51 and lost by 4. And West Coast versus North Melbourne in 1987, they were down by 58 and lost by 11. So a difference of 47 there.
Wow, so close. If only they started in the halfway through the third comebacks.
Maybe they would have had a chance. We can also have a look at the opposite. So the biggest blowout. So a team that's winning by a lot just continues to put even more on as the game goes. So back in now this is absolutely massive. 1919, round 12, St Kilda playing Sydney. They were they were down by 65 points at three-quarter time, and ended up losing by 171.
Yeah, there's actually a story about that, which was posted on the AFL website in June of 2019. The players basically started fighting amongst themselves, the St Kilda players, that is. So they basically gave up on the game as a team. They only had 14 players on the field because they had 4 injuries as well, and there was no bench back then. So that was sort of the story of that game. It was quite amazing.
It still really does stand the test of time. So that's the only time that that's happened, really. Nothing really comes close. The next highest is 77 points difference. So that was St Kilda versus Carlton in 1976. They were down by 24 points at three-quarter time and ended up losing by 101. So a difference of 77 there.
I think the only way that could possibly happen in this day and age is if we saw it with Essendon on the weekend. I didn't watch the game, but I saw a little story about it. Apparently they used their full 75 rotations and there was still like 5 minutes on the clock. So potentially a couple of players could have got injured and not be able to be subbed off. And then potentially the other team could use that to their advantage. Maybe if you'd have to have a really bad interchange manager to use all your interchanges.
You can get around that. You can interchange as many players as you want via the blood rule.
So you just start belting into each other.
Yeah.
Just running face first into pole or something. I don't know.
I'm not sure if either of you are like pro wrestling fans, but there's a thing called blading, which is essentially you hide a small razor blade in your sock or wrist strap or whatever, and you take it out and just sort of slightly gash your forehead, which bleeds a lot. Ric Flair does it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just above the eyebrow.
Yeah. So this is why Geelong gets sort of 76 or 77 rotations around instead of 75.
Yeah, Selwood just goes off.
Selwood's blading. I assume he's a big Ric Flair fan.
Well, your medical sub actually doesn't count because Essendon did manage to have one more interchange, and that was one of the players on the bench had a buggered shoulder, so they brought Braden Ham on. It was a very thin slice of ham because I think he was only on the ground for like 30 seconds, and then the siren went.
Well, you might need to look up the thinnest slice of ham.
Also, it also reminds me of a story of up in Queensland where you do like a scrum, an NRL scrum where essentially the heads come together and push against each other's shoulders. But what you can do is you can drop your head lower and move it across the left that the top of your head can hit above their eyebrow, and there'll be blood going everywhere. And so once they've got the blood, they need to get off. So there's like a blood rule for a front rower that essentially has to get off the field. And so the next time you go back into the scrum, you've got this massive advantage. So it's good to see that the blood rule can be exploited in most forms of football.
Another one I wanted to mention, we're seemingly getting this every week now because the bottom teams of North Melbourne, Collingwood and Hawthorn to a lesser extent, although they had a really good win on the weekend, are all starting to pick up points. Now people are asking the best wooden spooner. I think we might have talked about this as well on a previous podcast, but Collingwood's 6 wins in 1976 is the gold standard for that, and their percentage was 86.4. So we might have to work that into a post somewhere because we're clocking up double-digit asks on that one. So we'll have to we might do a bit more research on wooden spooners.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, it is North Melbourne. I'm just looking at the latest predictions. They've got a 77% chance of finishing in last, and their projected wins are about 5 to 6 wins. So we can definitely fact check that.
Well, they're playing Richmond this week. The way Richmond are going, they're not without a chance. And then their last game is against Adelaide, so that's another one they could potentially win. Adelaide are already on 6 wins.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Our last question that's come in from Salas. Silas Ware. Just wondering if anyone's explored the idea of what the ladder would look like if instead of the winning team receiving match points, 4 for a win, 2 for a draw, 0 for a loss, but instead if they got the margin and we decide to put that on a ladder. So it's essentially a ladder of the goal difference. So I've got a little custom ladder setup that I've plugged it into, and we can have a look at the 2020 season. So that means Geelong goes to number 1 on the ladder.
Let's go.
That's 2021 season.
2020.
2020.
It's 2020 season.
The last year's ladder.
So instead of Port Adelaide finishing on top, it would be Geelong, and then Port Adelaide would be in second. So Geelong would still have their 12 wins, 5 losses, and Port Adelaide 14 wins, 3 losses. But Geelong's point difference is actually, margins, cumulative margins is plus 332 compared to Port Adelaide's 316. So Richmond would still come in third place.
If we did that this year, Essendon would be in the 8, and potentially Richmond would still be hanging in there.
Richmond would be in 8th. They would be.
Yes.
So they'd currently be in 8th on a negative 31, and Essendon would be in 7th on plus 44. So that obviously comes off the back of their massive win against Gold Coast. I believe they won by 98 points. Absolutely massive. But there's also quite a bit of a bridge to the next tier. So Sydney are in 6th with plus 258. So there's a bit of a gap. So if Essendon want to go into 6th place, they need to make up at 200 or so in terms of margin. But in top spot are still Western Bulldogs by way out in front, 535 to the positive compared to Geelong in second place, 398.
Well, something else I noticed on the ladder, we'll probably check this out in the next few days, is there's, as you would know, 8 interstate teams. We call them interstate. So the teams in Perth, Adelaide, New South Wales and Queensland, they're currently sitting 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th. So 6 in a row there. And then Gold Coast and Adelaide are together a bit lower in 15th and 16th. I'm not sure whether 6 is a record for most interstate teams in a row, but we're definitely going to have a look at that one. I'd be very surprised if it's higher.
Yeah, so thanks to all our fans for sending in those questions. Please send in more. Thank you.
Otherwise, that's it for this week. Thanks, Bill and Liam, for your time and efforts once again.
No worries. Happy to be here. Happy to help.
Hooroo, mate. We'll talk next week.
And we'll see everyone next week.
Thanks for listening to Unnecessary Statness, the Useless AFL Stats podcast. Subscribe or follow on Facebook for more useless stat-related content.